Well, let's ease into kind of the topic that made us think to give you a shout, and that's CWD. Mm-hmm. And let me preface the whole conversation we're getting ready to have with a couple of things. First of all, there seems to be a clear line of demarcation between the believers and the not believers. And maybe not. Everybody, I think, believes and understands and agrees that there is a disease. It's not a zombie disease, but there is a disease that is real. I think the differences of opinion come on likely the solution and what that may be. But from the podcasts I've watched, the videos that I've seen, most conversations go one of two ways. How dare they think they can come in here and tell me that I can't put a salt lick on my property? And the other one just goes into scientific jargon, neither of which I think addresses most of the hunters in this country who are just logical thinkers and want to know what they should be doing or what they shouldn't be doing. What I'd like to do is just kind of have a conversation about what your opinion of, we don't need to get into the whole prions and how they're left in the soil. I think most people, if they want to know, they know that. But, left unchecked, what's it look like? And I'll be honest with you, Nick, I live in Indiana. It has not affected me one bit.
Right.
So I honestly, I'm not even embarrassed to say it. I really haven't cared up until now. But now there's enough, buzz about it where like, okay, let's find out. Let's just, let's go to the NDA and let's find out what their position is and, see what we need to do.
Yeah. And then let me just take a deep breath here before I get into this.
Go ahead.
CWD is something I've said many times in various presentations and meetings that it's a monster with many heads. And you might be able to lop one off, but you aren't going to kill it. You've got a lot of different things to deal with, so it's complicated. But let's, to your point, let's stay away from prions and transmission and all these types of things, and let's focus on what it means to hunters, why they should care, and what they can do about it. And, to your point, it's not embarrassing at all to say you just don't know and you haven't cared that much about it, because the reality is, even though we've got CWD in, I think, 26 states now, Oklahoma just come up with a positive on a deer farm last week. So I think that takes us back to 26. But at any rate, more than half the states in the country and 3 Canadian provinces have CWD. But when you boil down locally where the cases have been found, it doesn't touch most of the people in those states. So for example, I'm in Pennsylvania and there are a few CWD management zones, but if you don't live near one of those zones, it's still not really on your radar screen. Okay, so you're in a state in Indiana where they haven't found CWD yet. So therefore, it's really not on your radar screen, right, unless you were going to go to, let's say, another state, and like say you're going to go over to Ohio and their CWD area, you'd probably pay more attention. So that's one of the challenges, is it just doesn't, even though it impacts every single person that loves deer and loves deer hunting, it doesn't personally touch them yet. So it's almost like a generalization, like, well, do you care about the environment? Well, everyone's going to say, well, yeah, I care about it. And right. then someone says, well, okay, we want you to do these 3 things, even though it doesn't actually really affect you. Then people are like, they don't pay attention anymore. So CWD is kind of like that. The other problem with CWD is it's not you talked about believers and non-believers, right? So it's really hard. Nobody really believes, or at least very few people really believe in like the boogeyman, right?
Right.
You have this underlying fear of it maybe, but nobody really believes in it. And it's because they don't see it. No one's ever saw it. And that's another issue with CWD, in that it is not it's not a visible disease. So you'll have people who, we'll call them, even though they may believe, we'll just, for simplification, let's call them non-believers, okay?
All right.
You have non-believers who will say things like, if it's such a problem, where are all the dead deer?
Heard it.
And yeah, and the very difficult answer to that is there are dead deer out there. Number one, how many deer have you walked by that were dead, but you just said, oh, there's a dead deer, so you didn't add it to the list of dead deer that you've seen. But the other part of that is that CWD kills in a very slow, methodical manner, and it doesn't take out a bunch of deer all at the same time. So we get people that will say things like, well, EHD is actually the bigger problem. Because what happens when deer die of EHD, they all die at the same time. They all die on the same stretch of stream, and it stinks to high heaven, and people see all these dead deer laying there. And it's really easy to see why people they see that and they say, that's a problem.
Sure.
And it is a problem. However, the long story of EHD is that deer recover from it. It isn't 100% fatal. It kills a lot of deer, but deer also can recover from it, and they can also develop antibodies. That's not the case with CWD. So CWD is a slow killer. You don't have piles of deer and carcasses laying out there. And I got to see it to believe it crowd, it's going to be tough to explain to them or get them to understand why it's such a concern.